Thank you,
Well,
Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Chair, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Post-lunch sessions are pretty difficult, and the job given to me is even more difficult because I don't know if there are easy solutions to the problem that we are talking about, but I do feel what can be done is how best these problems can be managed. So what I have done, in my slides is that I would try and address following questions that you can see. First is, much has been talked about the region and the normal words that we have come across since yesterday is hopelessness, turmoil, chaos, and is there any hope? What the region is all about? So maybe I'll share some views as to how I view the region and what are the current realities as we see it. The second is about the regional order. Much has been talked about, so I'm not going to probably dwell much on it, except the ones that we do agree that it is changing. But then what are the key elements? Some of it we have already heard and highlighted, so I would rather try and focus more on where does India stand, in all this chaos and turmoil and problems that we see unfolding in the region. And what does this actually mean for India? How is India actually responding to these evolving situations and new developments? What has been its approach? And finally, what are the areas and the opportunities? And of course, challenges were discussed in the morning. My friend Kumar spoke about the challenges, so maybe I'll touch upon in the Q&A sessions. And then what could be the possible roadmap? What can be done under the current circumstances, given the potential and capability is that India possesses, and the advantages that it has and the limitations that it has. So when I look at the region, what I see is that for me, it is a region which has really surprised people. So it is a region of strategic surprise for me as a watch, a researcher who's been watching developments. This is also a region where people talk about two things. One is the resources, the rich resources, and the second, of course, is Islam. And when people are talking about the resources, there are opportunities, and there are also challenges because how people can exploit that resources, how that can be used as a political tool. This is also one question. So if we're talking about the region, then this is how it appears to me as a researcher. It is also, we have discussed about the geopolitical competitions. I think there is hardly any region where you can, not talk about geopolitical competition. So I think this is one word which is common across the regions that we look at. Geopolitical competitions are there. So it is given that when you have the resources, when you have the outside actors, the geopolitical competition becomes a reality, actually, when we are talking about these things. A region, of course, is today, full of wars and failed. Some areas are stable, I would say, but certain areas, of course, there are problems, conflicts, sectarianism. These are some of the problems that we do see. But also what I see today in the region is that there is a major transformation, which is happening in the region, both internally as well as in their foreign policy, externally when they're trying to establish new linkages, new alignments. So I think internally as well as externally, new situation is evolving. And I think a lot of people say, no, there are no hopes. But I think when you have problems, when you have issues, the hope and opportunity is also there. So that is how I look at it. I'm just flagging this because much has been talked about the changing regional order and the key challenges, of course. So there's not much except, what we spoke about last year in the conference. The only issue that was not, discussed last time was everybody was much hopeful about the outcome of the signing of the JCPOA and how it will impact. But suddenly we see, a sea change because the United States and Mr. Trump, who suddenly decided to withdraw, and the geopolitical implications of this we are still seeing. And from India's perspective, of course, there is, of course, impact as far as the outcome which are still unfolding as we see it here. The Qatar crisis, the Turkey issue, all of them we have actually talked about in yesterday. So let's not. The only thing that I want to flag here is the new feature that we need to talk more about is the role of the Asian countries in the region and their increasing presence and involvement, and the demand that they need to play a greater role. It also comes to India to play a greater role, but what actually, these players can do given the situation which is there. So these are some of the regional realities which you see today. I think the region still, it is confronted with political, socio-economic and security challenges. People are talking about the new social contract. So I think these are some of the challenges, the realities which have been discussed. So I'm not going to dwell much on it. They've been discussed in detail yesterday and even today morning. So let me come to, are there any options, for the region? And Ambassador Mousavian has talked about, regional solutions. I particularly feel, that the viable option that we can think about has to be an inclusive regional security dialogue. This is at the moment, given the tensions which are there between Israel and Saudi Arabia and United States and Iran, and many other issues. If you see Russia's presence, what is possible is that the region, has to address its own issues. If the regional players, the regional actors, they don't consider, come together and at least start a dialogue, things might be much more difficult when the outside players are there with their own interest, with their own agendas. Things might get much more complicated. But when we talk about the regional dialogue, what are we talking about? They have to be, based on the geopolitical realities. They have to focus on politico-economic cooperation, a constructive engagement, and the regional and extra-regional actors, models of engagement via regional. I think to an extent, I would say some of these issues have already been flagged. But the only point that I want to say, any dialogue that we talk about in the region has to be inclusive. We're talking about, Syrian crisis. We're talking about Russia, Turkey, Iran coming together. But can we really exclude Saudi Arabia from it? So I think if we're talking about any kind of a regional solution, regional dialogue, then it has to be an inclusive one. What does this new situation actually mean for India? And when it has, real stakes in India, some of them were highlighted by Mr. Balabhaskar in the morning, in the beginning of the session. So, if we look at the stakes, yes, the security, interests, fighting extremism and terrorism, economic trade and energy, 8 million plus people living there, regional and cultural linkages. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. And India, of course, is looking at these countries as a partner in addressing, this challenge of terrorism and extremism. So, and if we see the recent agreements and, during Prime Minister's visit and even before, that is the key component of our engagement with the region. How do we address, the issue of extremism and terrorism bilaterally and otherwise? I think here the economic interests are something which cannot be really ignored. And this is something which I think demands some attention. And if you look at this chart, this will tell you from 2013 to 2018. I think sometimes when we put the numbers on the table, they don't. You would see the graph going up and then you would see the graph coming down. But what needs to be explained is why, certain percentage has gone up, why certain percentage has gone down, and where do these countries actually figure in. So in nutshell, I would say the GCC countries, the Gulf countries, really, have been among the top 5, trading partners of India, and that is the hard reality. So if you look at the figures, they have been going up and down, but it also sometimes reflects certain situation, in those conditions. So if you look at the bar, you would see the UAE has been the major trading partner for us, followed by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain. This is what the graph can easily tell you. If we look at the trade with the West Asian and North African countries together, you would see the graph here, which would indicate that Iran, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. This tells you the colors are very well reflected here. So here you see Iraq coming up. As far as the trade figures are concerned, among these, Iran, Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. But if we compare GCC with non-GCC, the purple bar very clearly reflects that our trade with the GCC country as compared to the non-GCC has been much, much higher. So this also, gives us an indication when we are talking about the way forward. We need to focus more if we want to engage in terms of, increasing our trade, then we need to focus more on the non-GCC countries as well. So energy, I think much has been talked about. I want to highlight connectivity, which was not much. If you look at the flights, between India and GCC, they are phenomenal, So this needs to be highlighted. 700 flights a week between India and UAE. What does this talk about? This talks about definitely, the flow of people between these between India and the UAE, and of course, it being a hub, you see how much traffic is there between India and the GCC. So this is one aspect. So when we look at the region, from India's perspective, what is it? As I said, from India's perspective, of course, major internal and external transformations are taking place, offering both opportunities as well as challenges. I would say we are in the era of co-management, co-development of stable, secure region through economic diplomacy. But the key challenge is how to effectively actually manage relations with the regional countries located in confrontation and conflict. Therefore, I think for me, when I analyze, the mantra has been to balance, to cooperate, to connect, and build strong economic and security partnerships with each country. I think this is how it looks for me when we are looking at the region. How India has adapted to these new challenges and what is the policy approach toward the region. If I have to really summarize it in 2 words, 3 words, 2 lines, then I would say we have moved from look west to think west and now link west by building stronger economic partnership. And this is how we only used to talk about look east, look north, But this has been the journey if we are looking at our engagement with the region. And today, when we look at the region, we see a new Act West dynamism which has gathered momentum. With high-level visits, with many agreements signed and enhancing security and, defense agreements. So this is how, India is responding towards the region by building stronger strategic and economic partnerships. In an increasing, I would say, divisive and fractious region, India has been able to navigate its diplomatic activism right now. And here you see the focus on forging bilateral win-win relations with each country individually has been one of the key features. As I said in one of my slides, that it has adopted a very, very balanced approach, non-partisan policies, that what it has adopted. So coming to the present government and what are the key features of the Modi government's West Asia policy, I would say the focus on development and economy has been one of the major features. Greater significance being given to how much it can bring, to India. How can it develop, India's economy? A win-win situation for both the countries. This was noticeable in Prime Minister's visit to the countries, whether it was UAE, whether it was Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, or Israel even. So emphasis has been on enhancing trade and economic cooperation. We have the CII office opened in Tehran and Manama. So these are the indication of, India's increased economic and trade partnerships. Non-intervention and building strategic partnerships, of course, is the other key feature. Case in point is UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and we talk about ports. In February 2018, India and Oman, they signed a pact to extend dry docking and other facilities to Indian naval ships in the port of Oman. So this is one, and simultaneously India also signed, Chabahar is another reality which talks about the increasing partnership, infrastructure development, and this is. The other one, if we see, is the energy. And here, the thing that I would highlight is the transformation, of the traditional buyer-seller relationship into a long-term investor relationship. I'm not getting into details, but we have signed an agreement where India, UAE, and Saudi Arabia have moved forward on energy cooperation, and the details are very much there. Counter-terrorism cooperation, I think this has been the key when we're talking about our building partnership with them and securing our interests. I think this is one I'll probably move a little faster. India, has laid a very strong foundation for its relationship, even with the Arab League and India-Arab League ministerial meeting which started. So India has been regular there as well. But often the question that was posed yesterday and that often comes in is, what can India do in the region? And much is expected from India, you see. Can India bridge the gap between Iran and Saudi Arabia? This is a question which has come up time and again in all the three conferences that we have organized here. And there are different perspectives from the region and even within India. I think if you talk to 10 to 15, 20 scholars, you'll find these people having a different approach. Some would say, no, given India's role, India's stakes, India should play a very proactive approach, and, it should do, try and bring Iran and Saudi Arabia, be a mediator. The other group might, the other narrative would be, look, we have our own limitations. There are many problems and issues which, India may not be in a position, to be a mediator. So there are different opinions on this. From the region also, I have certain, statements coming as to why and how India can play a role. So the role that India can probably play is at a track 2 level. And to an extent, I think IDSA has succeeded in bringing various, experts and officials to the same platform, talking and debating very openly about their problems and challenges. And this is something that I guess is possible. But I think here, when we are looking at the regional complexities, India's own stakes would limit its direct role as a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's how I would feel. And when we look at, India's capabilities and potentials, there are some suggestions that I have what India can actually do. First, I would say, India could consider creating a regional center of excellence for countering extremism and terrorism based in any city in India. Organize an annual West Asia Summit, a big one, track 1.5, that would not only bring, officials, but also the academic community. So this is something which is doable. This could be a platform for dialogue for all the regional countries to discuss extremism and terrorism. Build a West Asian university, similar on the lines of South Asian University. Water and food security, I think this has been the major issue, and here probably India could constitute a working group on food and water security to share India's experience with the regional countries. Initiate an annual regional energy dialogue, This would be very beneficial for both India and the region as such, and given platform for discussing major issues related to this. And I think the major thrust of India's policy towards the region has to be done through economic diplomacy. There are many areas and opportunities, say in agriculture, information technology, infrastructure, maritime security, health, tourism, service sector, education, you name a sector which does not open up opportunities for both the countries. So I would say that India could only be a partner in bringing greater harmony in the region through its realistic economic diplomacy without getting sucked into the regional conflicts. And this is where I would stop, and I'd be happy to take the question. And thank you.